I guess we are actually live now. So, welcome to the Redacted Culture Cast. This is the first guest appearance where we have switched to StreamYard. Thank you for following us along this journey as we try to figure out the tech. As my guest was saying, the RTO stuff is a little bit of wizardry. Unfortunately, I have to be my own RTO at this time. So, today's topic or today's guest, I'd like you to introduce yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Yep, my name's Fred. I founded Counting Coup Tactical, I believe, 2001. Prior to that, I just spent 20-something years in the Air Force with Special Warfare. And then during my transition, COVID happened, obviously, and it fucked up a lot of things. Um, but thankfully, I had a lot of good friends that were high up in command at the time that we had gone through training and from the very beginning, and so they were very loose with me on what I needed to do as far as requirements within the unit on my way out. So at that time, I was trying to decide what it is I was going to do. Contracting was a thing, etc. But luckily, during that time, I got help. Going to NICO, seeing psychiatrists, stuff like that, and I figured out, thankfully, that I can't do this shit anymore. Like I want to really bad, but I put my wife through 15 years of this stuff. Was now around for my first two children. We just had our third, and was really enjoying being home and seeing her. So it's like, as much as I want to, the need is not that. Um, so I figured, I was an instructor at some point, and then as a team leader, you're always teaching the new guys coming on the teams, and I really enjoyed it. Really loved teaching, and so I started Instagram, trying to figure out the way of the world there, and was not very familiar with it. And I realized that a lot of folks appreciated the very subtle little things, tips and tricks stuff that maybe helps enhance the mission more or more capability, but it also allows guys to think about kit, firearms, whatever, in a different way. So I kind of related to like being that nice team sergeant that brings in the new guy and tells them, hey, like lace your boots like this, route your rucksack straps like this, etc. So just little things, and people, caught on to it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Apparently, there was nothing out there like that, which I didn't get. I didn't understand. On top of that, I was seeing a lot of stuff that was being taught, and I won't get into specifics now, so I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But things that were being taught that we had over the 20 years of GWAT have debunked, basically, that were not okay. A lot of it was just going back to basics. It was just doing basic stuff. It was nothing fancy, but these courses, companies, individuals were teaching advanced this and that or whatever, and it's like, man, that certainly is not the way, unless you are with a established group of people who have been training for set amount of time or whatever, and you're familiar with each other, you have continuity within your team, then yeah, maybe we could start bumping up the levels here. But I don't think the average individual has that amount of time or that local community to get into advanced tactics or whatever you want to call it. All it is very much the basics and just adding more problems to it. So seeing that, it was very frustrating with that kind of information getting put out. So in the beginning, it was very much fighting that those companies and individuals like, no, this is done. Don't do this. Do this. You quickly learn that that the cults and groups out there don't appreciate that, and then they're going to fight to the death for their favorite personality. So I had to rethink about the way I was going about things with that. Stayed more focused on. I know this is a big thing now, but I was a part of it. Staying more focused on the positivity of things. You see a lot of my original posts are stuff about people needing to be more capable and knowing that you are able to reach that level. It's just a matter of time and commitment based on the individual. We see a lot of videos and stuff of these higher level counterterrorism, hostage rescue units doing these things, and like, yeah, a lot of you guys can get to that point. It's just a matter of those individuals getting paid to do that, and they do it on a daily basis. That's why they're there. We can get into psychology levels and thinking and all that stuff. That's a huge requirement that some people can't get to. But for stick to the basics, like when it comes to shooting and stuff like that, you can get to that level. You can get up there. It's just a matter of constantly doing it.
Yeah, it's been kind of a challenge lately because as the distinction between the veteran or the military guy and the average citizen has kind of become opaque in many ways. Like there's still the service or the time doing the job. There is the job, there is being a ranger, and then there's ranger school. And there's still that conflict within the battalions of like, oh, are you a ranger because you're in battalion, or are you a ranger because you went to school? And people are going to say one, and
Yeah.
if you say the other, like you're a bad person. But the challenge that we kind of face is that and I thought of it this way: like if you took a person who had a decent amount of money, and I'm not saying like $1 million, but like quite a bit more than that, and he for whatever reason wanted to do something, fund he could pay for people's livelihood and so that they could train at all times and become almost as capable as say like almost as logistically and physically and technologically capable as say a a tier 1 operator in all the ways except for at least one. I mean there are exceptions, right? Like affording an AC-130 in an airbase is pretty expensive, but technically speaking within the Americans ecosystem, if you wanted to spend enough money on it, you could probably get a batch of never served in the military people to be pretty high speed. It might take a year, it might take 5 years, it might take, whatever, but if with enough money you can do it. But what one hurdle that you couldn't in theory, we'd make an argument ethically you couldn't get over is yeah, but as soon as that billionaire sends his dudes out to do a night raid, then he goes to prison because he doesn't have the ethical sanction by the government or by our population to go do that kind of thing. Some people might champion his cause or whatever. And so when it comes to like training and focus, one of the advantages that people in the military have is they have a handed down mission.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're trying to do. Okay, go train to do that. Mission dictates tactics, tactics dictate gear. At least that works within that framework. But now you take people like you and I, or the rest of our gun culture, and it's well, the mission's quite a bit more vague, and it's quite long term. It might be, I don't want my family to be victims of X, Y, and Z. But that's not like cool, I checked that box, moving on. Like we didn't do 100 night raids this deployment, or we didn't get the bad guy. It's like, well, no one raided my house today, and they didn't yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, it's insurance. You're paying all this insurance for one day that you might wreck your car, but you never do because you take precautions to do so. It can be probably demoralizing when you're putting all that much time and money into whatever field craft, survival craft, or shooting or whatever, and you never get to use it. But that might be the focus might be that you take the time to do it so that when your next generation shows up, you pass it on to them, and now you've cut their time in half that they're dedicated to, and they can move on more quickly to the next phase. So
Mhm.
there can be objective. It doesn't have to be I'll be the one holding the banners, charging the fucking cannons or whatever. It could just be passing the story along to the next generation.
And then the other part that's been I guess I would say it's been on my mind, top of mind lately is virtue is its own justification. Like it is, if it is a good thing to do, it is a good thing to do. And so I think within at least American society and American culture, I'm not saying that it is being, let's call it prepared, that makes us good, but it certainly has a good influence on population. It is a good thing for people. It's not sufficient enough to call somebody moral that they're capable, but it's a good thing for our us as civilians, as citizens, as Americans to pursue capacity so that we may make our environment better. And one of those capacities is being capable of and understanding the use of violence within an ethical framework, considering its legality, because legality flows downstream from ethics. And so, like, if we don't, I'll kind of restart this one. An observation throughout history is that people who neglect to learn how to do violence tend to advocate for genocide. The kind of
Yeah, I mean,
atrocities that people commit on one another is when they think, "Oh, I could never do that," and so
yeah, I think correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Jordan Peterson that said that. It's like a good man is not a gentle, kind, or whatever. A good man is a violent man. He
Jordan
just
Peterson,
knows how to
yeah,
control it.
yeah, Jordan
He,
Peterson is one that's one of his most quoted elements.
yeah, and that's absolutely true. We talked about. I've talked about it before on my page about um, doing this training seems like a passive type of security. You know, if the big thing happens, I'll be ready. But it's also active as well. People are going to see you doing these things. And, you know, it's all over the internet. People doing CQB and shooting at distance and all this stuff. And to the, how do I phrase this? To the correct type of people, that is terrifying. That is a terrifying thing to see 340 million Americans capable of doing what needs to be done if something is taken away or killed or threatened or whatever. Like, it's not something to fuck with. It's something they definitely will have to think about. And the hope being that it doesn't kick off, the hope is that that is just a natural deterrent. Like, I don't want to mess with this. So I'm going to not pass this bill. I'm going to not cause this situation or whatever. So
Yeah, there's an element within I guess you could say our brand name that I think that has made some point to that, and that is that so long as the tyrant doesn't know what I have, as long as the tyrant doesn't have access to my, let's just say, private information. Well, I mean, they do in some ways, but let's just say, so long as the government is restricted from easy access to having a not immediate knowledge of what I have and what I'm capable of and what are we doing and what's going on in my life. So long as the government doesn't have that form of surveillance state, it has to contend with the potentiality of their attempted tyranny not going well. And for some people, that's very intellectual. And for some people, it's very much so in their gut, where I don't want to kick that hornet's nest because you're not going to get stung. You just probably won't make it out very well.
yeah,
I think that's like a necessary element of the relationship between like government and population, is that we no longer be our citizens. We're now something less, or subjects, when our very privacy only exists at the behest of the governing, and that would be, well, anything short of catastrophic would be that you could say you could safely say that we would no longer live in any form of a republic. It'd be full feudalism.
yeah, and even then, like I struggle and have a hard time with having the government, I guess old school thought, but having the government in charge of my own security within our country. The federal government's responsibility is to keep threats out. So if you're trying to understand what it is I possess or what it is I'm thinking, that's not your responsibility. You're looking elsewhere. Now we could argue about the state. You know, is the state responsible for that? I would say my privacy is still mine until I become, you know, some type of threat, which I'm not. I love this country. I'm going to keep doing what I need to do to keep folks safe and happy and whatever. But I don't believe that there should be that kind of relationship with our federal government. I think it's really, really fucking. I consider that the more serious thing there. The way, in whatever form it is, the way they want to control certain things and get in touch into certain things, and then, yeah, as you said, try to know what it is I'm thinking or doing. Very much get into Minority Report shit. Like, you know, well, we think you're going to do something. Like, well,
Hmm.
okay, you have no idea. I mean, you didn't. I don't even want to talk to you, but you didn't even talk to me. to see what it is I'm thinking. So go away.
Yeah. When you were in the military, did you ever have I mean, I was in the army, so I had privates. But when you were in the military, did you ever have a private who, um, let's just say, who started developing a pattern of life that made him more suspicious, and so then it drew attention continuously until the bad things started coming out? You know what I'm talking about? Like, we had you would have a private who, who at one point in time had this sort of reputation, a good reputation, but then, a crack kind of showed. He was late to work on one day, and instead of like fixing it, then he was slow on a PT test, and then he kept getting attention on him and attention on him and attention on him until suddenly, you're like, oh well, you're actually like doing drugs, and you're failing a piss test or something like that. And how, like, sometimes I wondered how much of that relationship was like the authority imposing something upon the private, and or how much of it was the private sort of letting his problems dominate his life. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Like, when you have a
Yeah, yeah. I would think that maybe a majority of the time this is the first time we're away from mommy and daddy. There is no authority, but for lack of a better term, there is when you go to work. Whereas when you're with mommy and daddy, there's always an authoritative figure there.
Mhm.
They're going home. They're going home to their house or barracks or whatever, and there really isn't much there. Um, I would assume that the barracks has kind of like their own Lord of the Flies thing going on in there as well. Uh,
Oh, yes.
yeah, there's no moral authority when you go home. You're very much free, if you will, so you can get into some shady shit. Yeah, I think I see more of that in the good kids, growing up. Um, they very much didn't want to displease mom and dad, so they did the right thing, and now they're free. I've seen a lot of kids that had really horrific backgrounds actually had their shit together when they showed up, and it was pretty impressive. Like, those were a lot of the times the big performers because they had to prove themselves, et cetera. But yeah, I think a lot of that falls on the individual. I think especially within the military, they take no responsibility. They very much make you go to a muster on Friday and tell you, don't get anything pregnant, don't kill anything, don't end up in jail. There, I did my business, now go away. And it's on the NCOs and such to kind of take that time away now and lead them in the right direction. And a lot of times, military, it's very much, I don't give a shit. I'm here, shut up and do what I say, and that's it. If you don't do exactly what I say, then I get in trouble, and I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm gonna fucking put it down on you.
Yeah, the poop rolls downhill kind of thing, or the shit rolls
Right.
downhill. I was the reason why I was bringing that up was I was thinking about like the relationship between us and our government, in the sense of the it when you would have a private, or when you'd have somebody, and I guess I would like to try to pull it out of the military's perspective, but the challenge that we run into, especially with like the Minority Report thing, is the in our country we have this principle, and then our world, in the Western world, is sort of driven by this principle of innocent until proven guilty. And there's this idea that we're not, or at least our government is not allowed to function in such a way where it treats everybody as if they were already committing a crime, or even more importantly, that the capability of doing a thing could be considered equivalent to the culpability of doing a thing. And so, like, you could at any given time go out and commit a crime, but as a human being, if I were to treat you under the assumption that because you are capable, you will then do it, I no longer see you as an agent. I no longer see you as a human. I see you as something less. And we, at least in the West, or at least in America, at least at some point in time, or to some extent, have decided that it is a combination of ideal and codification in the law that people are innocent until proven guilty. Does that mean that there aren't those who will take advantage of it? Absolutely. But you either have to live in a world where you have essentially the potential of criminals, or the guarantee of criminals through government, kind of thing, the abuse of power or the abuse of the system. And it seems like we're kind of caught between those two right now, where depending on what city you live in, the criminals run the city from either the streets or from not the pulpit, but the heights of government, and sometimes both, I guess. But I don't know. I do know. I just find it really strange how we are not getting better. I don't know. I listened to
Yeah.
the State of the Union last night, and it was pretty authoritarian. It was pretty much like, I am your savior. I am your savior. We are a democracy, except for when I want to veto it, which is basically anything that goes against my campaign. And it wasn't a good talk. So
Yeah, I just got done watching a podcast about the very infamous mob boss, and he grew up. He became what do they call it? Not the guy or whatever, but he came a part of it in the 70s.
like a made man kind of thing.
Made man, yeah, he became made in the 70s and went through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s as a Don or whatever you will. And they asked him straight up, is the corruption worse now or was it then? And he said, without a doubt, now. Without a doubt, the corruption is worse right now. They asked him to explain a little more, but obviously he couldn't get too much into it. But he said within the organizations then, the government had a hard time breaking the law to do X, Y, and Z in order to catch, gangsters or whatever to do what. He said this day and age, it doesn't seem it's very hard, if at all possible, to be in any kind of mob, because the technology and their rules of engagement are the technology is so high, the rules of engagement are really non-existent. They're going to do what they need to do to infiltrate and gather and do whatever it is. Now, it's funny to talk about like how corrupt something is in order to get rid of something that's illegal, but just that comparison, hearing from this guy that's been through basically 4 generations of mob life, saying that now it's uncomparably corrupt within the government as far as how they're doing stuff. It's pretty crazy. I'm going to go back, and there was that was part 2. I'm going to go back and listen to part 1 in regards to like more of that stuff. But yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely come from the background where everything that I know about what you would call the mob is at best like fourth hand. I don't have
Yeah.
any. I came from a part of the country where it was not relevant at all, or any relevance to the mob was like vestiges of Al Capone's empire printed on billboards for the sake of advertising a fake speakeasy. So like it wasn't I did not live in an environment where it was immediate. Let's just say that. Now were they there? Sure. But like even the example of like the Hells Angels in our neck of the woods was like basically a bunch of old middle-aged white dudes who were probably accountants who wanted to go be a rebel on the weekend. I'm not saying that everyone in the environment was that, but like that was they were not considered a serious threat to the extent that you're like, oh my gosh, we're afraid of them when they come to town. It's like, oh, it's Saturday, okay, cool, the motorcyclists are in town. And then I didn't. So when I moved out to where I'm at and people would talk about how dangerous something like the Hells Angels were, it meant something completely different. And so it took growing up or maturing to see how that works. So like the mob thing is always interesting to me.
Well, it's interesting now that like we're talking about Hell's Angels that are kind of middle-aged, kind of has-beens or whatever. So we look at it as like that should be a positive. The agencies and governments and police did what they did it well, and now these are pretty much irrelevant groups, but at what cost? What it.
Oh no, it froze. I got you
Sorry, I
back.
got you. Yep.
Okay. So the last thing you said was at what cost? Like at what cost? You lean back and it goes away. What's going on here? So you talk, you lean back, and then it stops like it twice now.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
I
think
don't
it has
know.
to do with leaning. Let's give it one more try. Because what I'll do is I do pretty minimal editing. I basically just take times when we have technical difficulties and I put elevator music in.
Okay.
The one thing that one of the things that we've been focusing on as far as audience goes is that like it's not transparent, like, oh, we're transparent as in you can see what's going on. It's like, look, dude, I've been doing this podcasting thing for like 4 months. We will figure it out as we go. I would rather do it and stumble uphill than just not do it at all.
People appreciate the casual conversation.
Mhm.
The ones that like edit in between every little pause and you kind of like speed it up. Some
I have
folks
been
enjoy that. Yeah.
I've been on a show where the guy did that, and it was not. I was like, I just wouldn't go on with him again because
You
it's
sound
not.
really smart. You sound like you're right there all the time.
Thank you. Part of it is, I talk for a living now, so yeah. Oops, I have to be so good. As much as I try to go out and shoot and ride and do other stuff. So let's get back to where we were at. I just before the breaking, it was at what cost? So it's in one sense, it's a very good thing that that people in our country are not suffering under this. It's not tyranny, but it's a good thing that the population, at least in different parts of the country, are not in fear for their well-being because a band of bandits is coming around to cause trouble. There isn't like, you know, the in that sense going on, or there are other elements to what motorcycle gangs would go for and all these other kind of things. It's a good thing in the sense that, you know, that isn't as much of a threat to the daily lives of people, but at what cost? And I'm curious. I'd like to hear your elaboration of that.
So, getting back to this mob boss podcast, he was talking about, he had been indicted like 5 times, federal level, state level, whatever, and they never got anything. But at the at the end of his time, he saw people who were never caught ever, same conditions, but now they're getting caught. So it's like, what did they do different? And you'd have to assume that technology got better, so their uh, collection capabilities were getting better, et cetera, et cetera. But they were always cautious about how they communicated and open source communications and stuff. A lot of stuff's done face to face. Obviously, there's human stuff in there. They're putting in sources, but he explained how cautious they were, even with understanding that they might be infiltrated. So something somewhere had to get tweaked to allow maybe a little push to get them over that. Uh, it could be in the gray area, or maybe it is completely illegal, to push a little bit further into the legal portion of it so that they can get something. Like maybe someone had to sign something that they didn't really have any evidence for, but it got them a foot in the door. On top of that, like, who's to say that their collection capability on American citizens stops there? They have that capability now. Do you think they're just going to, all right, Batman 3 or whatever, he does this phone thing, and now he got what he needed and hits the button, and it kills the whole program? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt that the capabilities are only going to get better as far as what they've been back then. So
Well, it's the classic like Edward Snowden NSA problem. Like it's you've created this apparatus to target what you're calling domestic or calling terrorism, and now suddenly we're talking about domestic terrorism, and we're suddenly talking about, well, this the job needs a justification, and so we need to forever ferret out more problems, which on the one hand is a good thing. Like, you should be in pursuit of something, but we go straight to the problem of the ATF, is that like by all accounts, to the American population, the ATF is more focused on what the NRA would like to call law-abiding citizens have in their home than it seems to be focused on organized crime that is consequential to the average citizen. Like, in other words, there is plenty of crime going on in the streets of Minneapolis that the ATF would want to have attention on. But we do not have the goodwill. But the goodwill of the American people is not in defense of the ATF, because it appears that the ATF is more interested in going after your brace than the Bloods in Minneapolis, or than and I'm not saying the Bloods aren't citizens, or that it doesn't have to do with that, but there's a way that it works. There's an apparatus of social, let's just call it a social construct within a violent syndicate that would be worth targeting, but instead we're going to have first order effects, not even second and third order effects, on the American citizen. Like, if you were gonna, let's just say every single person who exists within the United States who is also also committed to, so let's just say Islamic terrorism. If every single one of them used the exact same firearm, not like the identical item, but like every single one of them used the same firearm, and you banned that firearm, the second order effect would be, well, then everybody else who has one is now it has to deal with the consequences. But we're not even dealing with that problem. We're saying there's violent crime over here, or there's organized crime over here, or whatever you want to call it today. Instead, we're going after this because this makes us look bad. This makes us look incompetent. We're going to produce this content, this ruling, because it basically shows that we have no idea what we're talking about on the leadership level when it comes to the very thing we're supposed to be regulating. It would be like the alcohol side of the ATF coming out and saying, did you know that scotch is a rum? And you can't have it now. It needs to be regulated like rum. And you're like, okay, we're done. Like, I can't take you seriously anymore.
Yeah, mouthwash is a problem. Hand sanitizer is a problem. So we're
Mhm.
going to ban both those things now. I mean, the ATF, in my when it comes to the firearms portion, seems like it should be solely focused on like cartel activity. The cartels in this country are unbelievably fucking well armed, and not just with firearms, but with technology as well. And the fact that you can go to places like Little Rock and find a fucking warehouse full of PKMs and RPGs and stuff like that, and that's a no shit. And it's like how did this get in here? How is it not tracked by this organization that does this? Probably
Dude,
because they're looking over here, like you said, trying to not look stupid.
yeah, dude, you want a belt? You want to hear what a belt fed sounds like? Come down to my neck of the woods. We'll a couple
Oh, I
hours away.
bet.
Yeah, a couple hours away. There you go. Now you know what a belt fed sounds like. We're leaving.
And not a lot of people know that. Like I tell that story to some other folks, and their minds are blown that that kind of capability within the cartels are here in the States. Like, yeah, man, like police in certain areas running that stuff quite often.
I know it's such a political touching point, and we're also going to, going back to the State of the Union address, where I guess from what I remember, or what's being reported, um, when the president was talking about the fentanyl crisis, the Republicans decided to heckle him and say it's the border, and like, so I know that there's like this kind of political, there's a word I'm looking for, which happens once a show, and so I got to get it over with. There's a theater, there's political theater going on over here on like the back and forth over the border, where what's real in certain areas on the United States border. I want to be very clear. On the United States border, it is not outside the realm of reason to see RPG fire. Like, you know what I mean? Like think about
Yeah.
that. Like, there's a guy on a hill with a PKM and an RPG, and he's coming into the United States. Like, that is not outside the realm of reality. I'm not saying that it happens every day. I'm not saying that it's happening every hour, but like when we're talking about challenge border, when we're talking about the American border, it being huge, it's being long, huge, is it ranges from human trafficking to drug smuggling to, just bureaucratic problems to understaffing to, there's literally, like territories effectively owned by non-American citizens who are using what the current administration would refer to as weapons of war to contain their environment. And the attitude of the American people, the population, appears to be apathy. It's not in my backyard. Like, okay, well,
I mean, until it fucking is, until that border gets closer, notionally gets closer and closer, not the real border, but they're not stopping. Cartels are not stopping.
and with technology, the relevancy of the physical line of the border is blurred, because what's to say the fentanyl that George Floyd took wasn't from this part of the country, or didn't take the 35 pipeline from Texas to Minneapolis, or you know what I mean, like it is now everywhere. And I mean, it's always been everywhere, and it's always going to be more relevant on the border areas, the border towns, the border states, but like it's kind of always been there. And now it's more where they're not interested in waiting for legality. It doesn't seem like the idea of this cartel, which again is a bit ambiguous, and I don't want to be like, I moving from a northern state to a southern state has opened up my understanding of how, let's just say, diverse the idea of the cartel is. I used to live in an area where it was like the cartel referred to as one thing, even though we knew there were multiple sections. Now where I'm at, it's quite a bit different. It's a little bit more, let's just say, personal. But
It's
yeah,
very blurred. Cartels, governments, locals, like it's all very blurred, and they all very much need each other.
But instead of focusing its efforts on, let's just say, curbing what is clearly foreign influence, foreign violent activity, our administration is interested in domestic nonviolent possession, as if that was a crime. And that does raise ethical questions as to the solvency of the organization. So now I want to kind of steer the ship gently in saying, we had as before we started this conversation, before we got on the show, you were talking about how you were talking a little bit about like SHOT Show, its approach, and how, let's just say, something like the brace ruling, you had an idea of what the brace ruling was going to do and an impact to gun culture, and then that gave you a perspective when you were going into SHOT Show, and some of your expectations were and weren't met. I wanted to kind of shift from complaining about the government, it's not necessarily complaining, but addressing issues and grievances with the government, to like, what I really do believe is that we are the people. Like, the reason why we have issues on multiple levels of our society all have to come from us. No one's coming to save you politically or use of force wise. And so, and I am kind of referencing Ian Strembeck from Rune Nation on the "no one is coming to save you" thing. But
yeah, no, with that attitude, like you're probably going to go in the right direction. The worst case, you want to train for the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is just you and your kids, and with the thought that no one's coming to help you. Now, hopefully someone is coming, but you can't rely on that. Yeah, so I would agree with that, with the training. Like it's on me. I actually had a interesting, that it's actually a funny story, but I'll get to that. So this was after my third deployment. I had 3 really heavy deployments, whatever, and came home. So I had been in a lot of combat, but this will get more relevant. But I always had a team. With me, so there was a level of confidence there. I had gotten home, and I was still very much over there because I I mean, I lived right near Bragg, so there's artillery going off all the time. So I was still in that mindset of being under, indirect fire all the time. So my job, I was a JTAC, so I would get up, put my pants on, walk to the talk, and start coordinating casts and shit. So something went off, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember just getting up, putting my pants on, and then I realized, shit, I'm home. What was that woke me up? So immediately thought I was an intruder. So I grabbed my gun, went to the doorway to my room, and then we had a long hallway to the end. And I saw someone there that was crouching, and immediately, like, it was adrenaline rush that I had never experienced. So 3 combat deployments in, but this was different. My wife was there, and I had my daughter down in the room on the left. So very, like, unbelievably stressful situation. Never been into it. It's a different level of stress when it's just you. That's it.
This is,
and nobody's coming.
and where are you living at the time? So are you in a, because that context in this one's a little bit important. You were in a house, or what kind of base? What were you, on base housing, off base housing? Like,
No, we were off base housing down in Rayford area.
okay,
Personal home.
okay, so you're in your home. So like, you hear a noise, your instinct, your deployment mindset, kind of still there, getting ready to go to the talk. Realize you realize you're not overseas, so there's no talk to go to. So then you think there's somebody in the home, and I'm assuming there's still a little bit of this, like, I mean, you had to be a certain lacking lucence, or lacking, cognizance to just assume the talk, because you're tired, you're waking up, and then now there's a person crouching down, and you're in a, it's not, because the first thought I was thinking, like, well, you're in the barracks, there's somebody drinking, like, or
No,
something.
no.
You're in a house. Yeah, that's a bit much.
But yeah, like, I had never experienced that before.
Okay.
So much combat, a lot of shooting, explosions, stuff like that. So you think you have it down, but getting to the point of it's on you. That's a level of pressure that I had never experienced in that moment, and it was fucking terrifying. It was me. It was
Mhm.
me. My daughter is in between me and that thing. So much overwhelming shit going on. So again, getting back to the point of, hey, no one's coming. I think it's very much that is the worst case scenario, and that's a scenario that's worth fucking training towards.
Mhm.
Um, Ended up being a vacuum. I had the light switch right in the hallway. I had my gun out, and I flipped the switch, and it was the fucking vacuum at the very end of the hallway.
Yeah, but still, like, it is. I would rather have it been a vacuum cleaner, or a
Yeah, for sure.
vacuum. I'd rather have it been a
I,
vacuum than something else, right?
yeah.
But it shows the relevancy of, like, that awareness is terrifying, where you're like, there is no solution. I have to, there is no solution outside of, like, what I have to do right now. And
Yep.
of
It's
course you're.
just you. It's just you, and the problem has to be solved now. There's
Mhm,
no, you can't think about it. It has to be solved now. Luckily,
mhm,
the problem solver was just flipping the switch,
mhm,
and that was the end of it. Um, but yeah, so getting sidetracked with the quote there, but yeah, so when I was getting into Instagram and trying to find a foothold in the community, it was very like detrimental into the world stuff. It's like, we got to do this now. ATF is taking everything. We got to natural disasters, riots all over the place, and people were very much pounding their fists on.
When I'm gonna ask for clarity, when you say it was very much, what are you referring to? Are you referring to
Yeah, the
it was
the community
detrimental, as in
itself.
the attitude of from your observation, the attitude of the community was very, like, immediate alarm bells are ringing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
like you need to be prepared right now.
Mhm,
So the training has to be fast and quick, and you need to up your status, level 4, level 5, whatever. Now is very fast paced. And I have never experienced it for the most part. I've been gone most of my life, so I was like, holy shit, yeah, this is bad. Um, and never been the shot shows you spoke of. Uh, Getting into more, okay, the ATF is bad. 3-letter agencies are bad. and then everyone in the community is toxic, and it seemed like a really fucking shitty situation that was going on, and I didn't understand it, and I was ultimately kind of getting on the bandwagon of like, yeah, this community is toxic as shit. Like, I don't understand what, like, this is crazy. But at the same time, you had all these little additives of riots going on here, natural disaster there. We had very recently our power substations attacked here in Moore County, and they hadn't had power for 5 days. So it was still, I mean, it was real. So they had this end of the world situation talk get trained now, and then it's being backed by all these horrible things going on. So yes, with SHOT Show, I had that mindset. I had it. We're going to show up, and it's going to be this serious conversation of all of us trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong, and who's helping the community, who's not, and going into that with my defenses up, and it really was not like that whatsoever. And I was actually super thankful for that. I found it extremely positive. I found that a lot of people were very engaging, very wanting to know more. There was not a dick measuring contest whatsoever. All the high profile and toxic and whatever individuals are there, and there were no fists thrown. Everyone was cordial. Everyone was talking. Now, I obviously one person I didn't see everything, but I didn't get a sense of any of that. And this is when the brace thing, came out right before, and no one was talking about it. I didn't give a shit. It was so absurd. I think most of the people there knew that it was such an absurd thing that it's just not going to happen. And maybe that's a bit ignorant. Maybe there's probably more to it, but the attitude was not negative whatsoever. It was very positive show or whatever, having been through, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
The year before there was a smaller attendance because of the end of the
Yeah.
how does the drinker say it? The specific virus of unknown origins or whatever it is.
Mhm.
As a result, there was a diminished attendance, and the convention center sort of half-heartedly attempted to enforce some form of masking, and so that was the de rigueur of last year. It was like everywhere you went, there was some sort of like every comment, every booth, every conversation had almost always had some sort of like that was the thing that was the icebreaker. Oh, the mask thing is dumb. Yeah, okay, so how's your company doing? That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So whereas this year the ATF subject did come up, but I was surprised. I expected it to be the icebreaker of SHOT Show. Instead, it came up from time to time, sometimes in an impassioned argument, sometimes in a moment of frustration, sometimes in well, this is stupid. Sometimes it was, did you see what happened to the ATF booth? But overall, and I'm thankful that you're adding to the list of testimonies that made the testimonies to the observation that as far as the community, which is vague and will always be vague, and if you want to criticize the way that I pronounce vagues, and so be it, but don't you know? But but it was decidedly less ego driven this year. There was a lot less of the I have been to SHOT Show where there is no real conversation. It is only dick measuring. And you're like, wow, it's a nice change. Where it goes is always going to be up for question, but I don't want to rain on the sunshine. I don't want to rain on our parade before it finishes. And like it's a good thing. I do think that we are, I would say, ideologically more, not ideologically, gun culture in 2022 is more mature in its ability to converse with one another and is less interested on collecting accolades in general. There are exceptions. And it's interesting to see because I experienced a range of responses to pessimism. It's this is the beginning of the end of gun culture. They're going to take the braces and they're going to take the ARs, and then they're not going to take them, but they're going to make it impossible to pass them on, and then the generation's going to. Or it was like, this will backfire, and all the way ranging from full pessimism to full optimism um, in attitudes. But what was valuable was the communication. That I saw so many conversations going on where it was less about who's cooler, which, I guess could have its place, but it's a nice shift.
Being cool, you got to earn it. You can't demand it.
You have you're not you don't you have to earn your place at the table. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You elitist bastard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's with anything like that. There's going to be an extreme, and then it settles down.
Mhm.
So the prepper thing, was huge. People were kind of like, it caught attention from other sides of the media and shit, and now we're looking at these people as crazies. I mean, it was talked about a lot at nauseum about prepping and food and et cetera. Extremely important subject, but I think it was to a point, to tell people like, if you're down in Texas and you have an ice storm, do you have enough food for 2 weeks, or kind of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it settled down, and then the next thing showed up, and it settled down. I think the ego thing is what it is, and now we're seeing a lot of counter to that, where you see a lot of guys who had just recently retired putting looking to like bring these guys back down to level, if you will, not necessarily wanting to destroy them and their business and who they are, but like kind of saying, hey, no, this is too much. Like, you need to bring it down and focus on what's really important. Not to say they don't have important stuff, but they're mixing it with other things that kind of are vague in their intentions. Like, are you teaching this weird thing because of money, because of wanting to look important, you want to sound important? Because based on these guys, and who's to say they're right, whatever, but they believe that that's not that important, that this is more important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to do this, and then eventually we're going to be like this, and it'll be fine until the next personality shows up.
Well, it'll equalize. And so, could you give an example of when you're talking about like things that are important? I can think of one set of conflicting arguments is um two examples would be, being able to move in kit versus your EDC, or another one would be CQB versus recce, or what people refer to as recce, which is a little bit more like, long range patrolling.
Yeah, so like the kit thing is yeah, it's not bad to train in it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
When it gets to if and when it gets to that point, it's not going to fucking matter. Your EDC stuff is what it is because there's maybe more relevant situations going on, natural disaster, power outage. You have a friend that needs help in the middle of whatever that is. But if it gets to a point that we're throwing on body armor and sitting in trenches, like, you don't have a choice. You're going to figure it out. It's not something that that I think you need to train to every day. And like, I'm not going to criticize people that do it because that's good on them. It keeps them motivated. Fuck yeah, keep doing it. But is it necessary? I'm not sure. Like,
Can I tell a story?
it's desperate enough. You're going to deal with it. Yeah, go
I
for it.
I was there was a story. This is a personal story. Is so I lived in Minneapolis in 2020. My family's from Minnesota, and so I was in Minneapolis when the riots began. I was able my wife and I were able to be in the vicinity of the third precinct when they burned it to the ground, and so part of that was, we know the city, we were from there, and so, but it was so the 2020 riots were very relevant, and given what I've been doing for work, or who I am, or my relationships with people, and so long, so forth. Suddenly let's say my skill set became very relevant. Oh, you know how to carry a gun, you know how to shoot, you know how to do body armor. And there was quite a bit, and I'm not the only one who got this, but there was a consistency amongst people that I knew who were instructors, gun culture people, or whatever, where their friends would come to them suddenly and ask for, what kind of gun should I get? What kind of body armor should I get? What kind of this, that, and the other, right? And there was a very, very aggressive, and I'm going to say this, there was a harsh distinction between people who who were at least comfortable enough in a plate carrier where they weren't going to be a detriment to their own community and their immediate surroundings, and those who panicked, acquired the stuff, and made each situation worse. And so,
As far
this
as
is
how, so they acquired, they just
so
like, I'm
bought
sorry, go
it,
ahead.
like bought it or pulled, like the you could tell in the mindset and the demeanor of different people at different
Mm,
points in throughout the city on those who had those this was their first time and they were essentially panic doing things. And a really
right.
good example of it would have been like, was one person came to me and said, I need to buy a plate carrier, I'm in trouble. And I'm like, and the response was, like, I'm in trouble. And of course, he was, and unfortunately, his attitude was something like, well, I'm an activist, and they're gonna, these people are gonna come and hunt me. And it's like, no, you're not. First of all, no, you're not. And second of all, no, this is not true. And third of all, it's literally too late, dude. Especially for you, is when it comes to, like, I wouldn't advise with your attitude. I would not give you advice to go do this thing, because you live in a delusional world where you think that everybody is out to get you. And so, but the thing was that had influence over this element is that whether or not he thought about it or not, that was the first time he had considered buying this stuff in this way. And so there was and this is going to sound kind of, this may come across as a bit elitist, but we for those of us, for many of us, myself being the example, there was a pretty stark difference between people who had never held a rifle real outside of a range, or held a firearm outside of a range, or held, worn a piece of kit before, and now they had it. Now they acquired it. The people of means went out of their way to go acquire things. And they were able to go buy the stuff, but it did not, that was not the issue. The issue was that they did not have the mindset. So, like, when I think of it, they didn't have the mindset, the demeanor, the attitude, the whatever, that so much so that they made situations worse. They escalated tensions where they needed to de-escalate tensions, and they created conflicts where they needed to create essentially deterrence being not just passive, but like, I have to have the discernment by a person's demeanor and dress and appearance to discern whether or not they're an actual threat or they're just somebody there. And so, as a result, I can see the relevance of the whole plate carrier conversation in immediacy, but it wasn't whether or not they had it and could wear it that was the issue. It's the people who tried to learn how to do it in the heat of the moment made situations worse because they were so self-conscious about how horrible they were at doing the thing that they spread that, I don't know, want to say self-consciousness, but they made things worse. It would have been better if they had just gone home and stayed home. But they had to, put on the thing and do the thing. It's like, okay, you're not helping here, go home. And
I mean, there's a point where I know it feels like doing the right thing, but wearing overt camouflaged carriers and helmets and stuff and standing out in front of a gas station is actually going to make things worse. Um, if something does need to be done, like there is something that's said to be, the gray man, whatever, having something readily available and being able to communicate with people. Um, Not necessarily at an authoritative level, but you want to build rapport with those kinds of people because you don't want them to burn your shit down.
yes,
Um, but there's, being, hey, let's let's throw on a fucking plate carrier and a rifle and let's go stand out there and pump my chest and say, I'm not going to move, kind of thing. There is a time and place, but probably not it when you're facing 60 to 100 people. Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna mow those people down? And I can't say don't protect your shit. I can't make any suggestions. I was not fucking there.
Mhm.
But me on the outside looking in, and I am trained or whatever, I probably wouldn't have gone as overt. It still would be an EDC thing,
Mhm.
but maybe throw in plate carrier underneath my coat, and then I'm trying to solve problems with my fucking words and actions rather
Yeah,
than
being able to escalate. It's like being skilled.
correct.
Being able to escalate is not the same thing as demonstrating that escalation.
Right. Yep.
We've all worked under an ops chief or an LT or whatever who was maybe we all have. Saying we all have worked under is not the right way of saying it. It's just not right. Um, the problem that you have with an overzealous administrative leader is that he is incapable of A, trusting on people, and B, distinguishing between when you should be overt and covert. And a person who's capable, and this is being a value set, maybe not quite a virtue, but an argument being, it is good to be capable of functioning overt so that you are capable of scaling, and by being capable of scaling up, you can also scale down and meet the situation appropriately. It's the same thing with use of force. Is that if you only have two options, apathy or murder, you can only treat every scenario with absolute violence or apathy, and that's not how the world works. And so insecure people who are insecure in their own capability to be violent tend to swing from doing nothing to belt-fed cyclic on a crowd. And when it comes to an individual's capability, let's just say in being able to maneuver and move wearing a plate carrier, I think it was Christian Craighead who said in a conversation with Grand Thumb lately about his attitude, and it was, you train so that you free up your mental space when you're in a stressful situation, so that you don't have to be self-aware of that firearm in your hand. You're thinking about solving the problem as opposed to, "Oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing." And the same thing goes to with when we're talking about, like, overt wearing a plate carrier and wearing your gear is you absolutely I'm not saying you have to, but you need to be able to at least train to comfort in that in an uncomfortable scenario, so that if you're going to go to the point of putting that on, you don't see a bulletproof vest, as you're going to call it, because whatever, you don't see a plate carrier or a vest or whatever as the solution to the problem,
Right.
because it's not. It's the appropriate dress for the scenario that provides additional capability to be the appropriate solution to the problem. But that all starts up here, and that starts down here in your head and your heart, where you can't approach it like, oh well, I put the plate carrier on and then it stops bullets. It's like, okay, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're too late to the game. Retire, kind of thing. And that is something that I saw. Like, yes, am I like is it at all likely that I'm gonna be in a scenario where I'm gonna have to throw my kid on and go defend my house like the Alamo? Very unlikely. Very, very. If I'm out in the woods and I'm doing something, or whatever, if I'm out in the mountains and I'm doing something, is it likely that I'm gonna have to? No. It's the Wolverine scenario, with the exception of air balloons, is not as common, is not as likely. But we have seen that the scaling, being able to scale, is important. You become more capable of scaling by knowing what the high and the low ends are. We all know the low end, it's going to bed, but the high end is, it's like, okay, so I know I'm capable of this, I can scale down to this. I know that I'm this capable in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, So I'm going to meet force at its appropriate level, and knowing that I can escalate is that confidence imbuing principle. And so when it comes to being able to operate in a plate carrier, I think that's where that value comes in.
Yeah, that makes sense. The problem being, a money thing now. You have to acquire all those levels, and typically, being the green machine setup is probably the last step. You finally get that helmet or that plate carrier, or whatever, and now you have all the kit. But do I need to wait? Do I wait until I get to that position? Absolutely not. Like you can still build your level up until you get to that max level. So if saying like I need to be at my max level training there so that I can scale down, I wouldn't take it as wait until you get all the shit and then start training. I think you can work your way up there.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah. The EDC thing to wearing a war belt to wearing it, or EDC with chest rig to EDC with chest rig and armor to now you've got knives and helmets and fins and scuba gear or whatever. I would not wait to get to that level. I would definitely continue it going. But then the question is what to train at. There's just so much shit out there to train to. I think where my comment is really relevant is training to every scenario that's out there, which is just unbelievably time consuming when you can get back to just the basics, like firing in all these alternate firing positions on your back, training to like you lose your arm and now you're shooting with your rifle between your knees or something. Like how about we actually shoot each other and then really train being shot, and how we like in those situations it's so damn desperate. You're going to figure it out. I think there's benefit to, I wouldn't call them like training events or whatever. I call them like familiarization events, ones where they do alternate shooting positions, and hey, now I'm gonna tie your arm to your hip and you can't use. I think those are confidence building type of things. I don't think you're really learning a skill set. It's just to show that if you're in that position, you can work yourself out of it. Like Kyle Lamb used to do something like that. Like he would set up the situation. Hey, your driver's side vehicle, you lose your left arm and you have to engage with the rifle outside the window so many times and get out. And he wouldn't tell you how to do it. He would just watch you. He said, he said, I do that because sometimes guys come up with some really creative and effective ways on how to do it. And then I learn from watching these guys, and then I take that back and spread it on to others. So there are benefits to it, but who has the time for that? Who has the money for that? If you do, yeah, man, build your confidence up in it. Realize that like this might just need to be a one-time thing, if at all, just to show me that I can do it. I am capable mentally, physically, shooting behind my back, one-handed with no eye or whatever the crazy fucking scenario it is. And like, okay, my skill level is where I appreciate it. My confidence level is good, and then move the fuck on back to basics. I don't think we can harp enough on knowing how to just the basic shit, whether it's shooting or Ranger handbook, maneuvering, basic life care, life-saving skills. I mean, they're not sexy. They don't make a great YouTube video, but I think those are the critical things. And so, like you said, coming back to the riots, you have guys in full fucking mop gear and shit or whatever. Having never done that stuff before, yeah, you become a huge liability, not just for yourself, but everyone around you. If you have to sprint, your teammate or whoever, buddy, is 50 yards away and he's getting overwhelmed and you have to sprint that far. By the time you get there, you're useless. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty easy to take care of. It's basic stuff. Wear it on the range or, do physical fitness stuff with it on and just get used to that thing.
Yeah, like there was a pretty solid distinction between people who were so self-conscious in their equipment that they were incapable of making a friend from foe distinction in an accurate in a reasonable amount of time. There was a very clear difference between somebody who was so self-aware of themselves in their whatever they were trying to do that they they were incapable of even making an assessment of what they were looking at. And that's and there was a distinction between those people and those people who put it on and forgot about it. And that was kind of the point, is that like, this isn't the lesson learned, but that's the point that I'm saying within this one, is not to sort the men out from the boys, as we say, but it would be to say that was a lesson that I was able to learn from in trying to figure out a better way to articulate this concept of, there is a value and there's a virtue that we're kind of in pursuit of when we say things, or we advocate for or we claim things like, training your kit, is that so that if you have to put it on, it's not uncomfortable. It's not so you're not so self-aware. And I think the same thing goes a little bit to these alternative shooting positions. Is it's not a 1980s, crane kick karate move that like wins the day. This isn't like some magic move that gives you a super ability like a video game character. It's so that when I'm doing it, it's what I would refer to as like explorative learning. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I lost you. Oh, this is a bummer.
There we go.
There you go. We're back. It's so I'm before the interruption.
I could hear you. Yeah, I heard everything you said.
Yeah. Okay. So before it becomes it's explorative. Like, in other words, okay, I want to figure out I want to be able to shoot one-handed. I want to shoot with my offhand so that I'm not so uncomfortable with the tool that I'm not like, I can at least do it. I would never do it out of preference. But
Hell no.
it's not like I take 17% of my training time to do this and this and this. It's so that I train I want to at least explore enough in it. And this is just how I'm thinking about it right now. Instructors can disagree. It's fine. But the point that I'm saying about it is that, like, part of that process is me, and this is how I think gun culture has caused itself to has stifled its own growth, is that we've been so concerned about safety, especially in how, like, range structures have been built. And maybe you want to talk about legality. There we go, we lose it again, but we'll see. If you said you could still hear me, we talk in so much of how we address it. I gotta wait. I'll wait till you come back. I want to have to edit this out. I'm back.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Huh. Well, maybe somebody's onto us. Like, this is the first time using StreamYard, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we're being listened to for sure.
Oh, for sure. But the idea of being able to do these skill sets is so that, like, I'm not, what I'm saying exploratory is, like, I want to be able to know what I'm capable of, and like know, kind of like you said, confidence building. And so it's like, it goes back to the whole CQB thing, in the sense of, like, I want to be capable of doing a dynamic and a deliberate clear, so that I can do both and I can make the evaluation of whether I do one or the other. And it just takes experience and time and practice. And so so that leads to a different subject, that one that you started bringing up earlier, is talking about how we think about a rifle, and how we think about a carbine, and how we think about the capabilities of the firearm, and how that affects how we train with it, strategize with it, move with it, and so long and so forth. And you made the argument on a phone call that the capabilities of a rifle tend to be much further out than what we're commonly using them for, given finding a 800-meter range is not exactly easy for everybody everywhere in the country. But we never actually talked about that, and I'd like to hear your point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's called a rifle, not a handgun, but even handguns can get out there too. If we want to think about it on a very, even a safety concern, most police engagements, barely even 100 meters and in, but probably even not that far. But people are concerned more about home invasion stuff and that kind of range, and like understandable. But if you understand that platform, you know that if that's going to be the case, you're very much, and you should always be anyway, uh, accountable for all your shots. Because if you throw one, that thing is gone. And who's to say where the hell it's going to go? Especially if you're a cop shooting down the street, and you see a lot of videos where once the fucking button is pushed, they're dumping a mag into that guy or whatever. So are all those rounds going on target? If you got a guy at the end of the hallway in your house and you're just dumping rounds, who's like those? They're going to keep going, depending on what kind of building you're living in. But so if you want to look at it as a safety perspective, there are no berms out here, and that round is going to do what it wants to do if you're going to miss. But beyond that, beyond the FUD safety shit, it is a capable system for shooting at distance, and that's what its purpose was to engage it. What's the Army manual say? What, 500 meters for point targets?
I recall the M4, which is like a shoulder fired semi-automatic gas operated blah 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 blah, like whatever.
Yep.
It was referred to as a 400-meter point target, 600-meter area target.
I love the area target thing. I love that. That's funny. So like, if you just want to if you want to make it rain, 600 meters is where it's at.
Yeah, where does Middle Eastern celebratory fire come into effect here? You know what I mean? Like, we never hear about like, oh, like, where's that coming down? But
yeah, so if you got a target at 600 meters, just put it on full auto and something's going to hit. But I believe we've kind of lost the understanding of the carbine or rifle's full capability, because we're on the more positive side. We're more focused on what might be realistic to us personally, which is understood. And most folks have a decent understanding of the law, knowing that you probably will have a tough time justifying killing someone on your property from 200 meters.
Yes.
So I can't complain about it. I can't get on people's fucking asses for not understanding the full capability of the rifle.
The emphasis on
time,
the emphasis on I gotta. This has been on my the emphasis on shorter range engagements can be explained very quickly. The majority of populations, at least in the Western world, live in cities. The majority of police officers work in cities. Therefore, the majority of interactions that are documented take place in cities. And so if you're going to just follow the data, you're going to be led by the data to say everything happens within a city. But that is not what a firearm is capable of. And so you're limiting the capacity. How we got there makes sense. Culture, so much of culture is transmitted through the internet, which has primarily been run by people who live in cities, whose primary data sets and police officers exist within urban environments. So there's a reason why all of our information is so not centralized, but so saturated in the shorter range engagements, especially because we live in houses and we have these environments. But the saturation of data is not the same thing as the capabilities of the platform. And so that's the shorter range engagements make sense. We all live in cities. Most cops live in cities. Most engagements take place in cities between police officers and otherwise. Therefore, most of the data that we have is in reference to short range engagements. But that is very different than the capability of the platform.
Yep, sorry. Absolutely. I'm sure. No, I'm sure. My first 2 deployments were to Afghanistan, and man, it was an eye opener. We were very much used to 25-meter ranges. Occasionally, we get 100 meters, and then maybe you shoot the unknown distance range once or twice, and but you're so used to 25, 50-meter ranges, and that's what your engagements are. And then your first engagement in Afghanistan is like 450 meters, and you're having a hard time even seeing targets out there, let alone trying to engage them. And now you're really like, holy fuck, I hope this ACOG is on its game. Like I've never done a 450-meter shot in my life. I hope this BDC reticle is good for 62 grain. Just gonna send it. So that existed even when I was in at the very early portion of it. I'm sure it still does exist. 25-meter ranges exist all over every Army base out there. But knowing, again, I think probably most relevant to the current situation is knowing that if you have a negligent round off target, that's going to go somewhere. Now, if you want to start getting into long distance engagement stuff, that's probably nowadays more relevant to either law enforcement or hunting or whatever it may be. And long distance engagements on the civilian side, for the time being, is more for PRS and such. But knowing that you are capable, not just the rifle system, like you should know that. You should know that a long ass barrel can send around a very long way. But knowing that you are capable to understand what your limitations are, but also what you can expand to. Like 100 meters is oftenly called shooting at distance, and that's absolutely crazy. That's I think Mike over at X-Ray Alpha, he just had a podcast, and he considers 100 meters as CQB distances, which is interesting because it makes sense. You think about Walmarts and churches and stuff like that. Like, he considers 100 meters to be close distance, and there's a group of folks that say 100 meters and 200 meters is far distance, and that's absolutely crazy. If you're 0 to 100 meters with your carbine, and it doesn't matter what grain bullet you're using, it doesn't matter what length of barrel, a 200-meter shot is only a 0.5 mil hold, which is the size of your dot almost. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of hold, much hold at all. 300 meters is 1.5 mils, like that. That's barely holding anything, and that round is just going to keep on fucking going. In our classes, we'd have guys, some guys that were doing really, really well when we pushed them out there. Guys shooting 62 grain, 16-inch rifle out to 1,100 meters. It took a lot of talking in on to do, because obviously the winds are doing quite a bit to it out there, but it made it out there, and he hit the target a few times.
16-inch barrel, 1,100 meters.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's not a realistic engagement on whatsoever. But looking at people's faces and seeing that, like, I can do this if for whatever reason I'm absolutely, like, maybe a mortar team is hitting me or something, but I can absolutely do this and get myself out of a situation if I need to. I'm capable of doing that. It's something you don't want to get into, but I can get out of it and then make a decision whether to re-engage another way or just completely disengage completely. And then, so that's worst case scenario, civilian side. Maybe that's more military side. Guys are seeing a 450-meter shot or 500-meter shot just being damn near impossible. And then on the police side, seeing that 100 meters is absolutely irrelevant shot, but it's not considered long distance at all. That's a carbine, whether it's 10.5 inch or 14.5 inch, that thing will go way further than that. And so you need to be cognizant of that. One, to end threats, but two, to be aware of your background, as always. But I think we've lost a lot of what the purpose is of a rifle, and then what its capability is. Most importantly, what the capability is. If you don't see yourself shooting at distance for offensive purposes, hunting, self-defense, whatever, I don't know, then understand the dangers of that thing if you're off target.
So you've identified a let's just say a problem. You've identified a problem. How would you recommend somebody go about solving that? How would you what's the pathway, and how, maybe another way of saying it is, like, how do you know you've solved it? How do you know you've accomplished, like, okay, I recognize that a deficiency in my ability to shoot at distance. What would you consider a solution? Other than, we could say just go do it, but that's.
Yeah, you can go do it. I know that resources are very rare. I know, like, ranges, I think More common, you're looking at 25 and 50 meters. Occasionally, you probably have a 100-meter target somewhere. I've noticed quite a bit that there are a lot of ranges popping up around the country that are pushing it. They want 1,500-meter ranges and stuff like that. So they're coming around. You may have to drive a couple hours or whatever to get to that thing. It's something you just have to balance. I don't think you can solve it unless you actually absolutely commit to it. There's plenty of resources, open source resources on how to shoot distance carbine, if we want to call it distance carbine. We call it just rifleman 101 shit. If you have a rifle, and you want to be a rifleman, you should shoot at rifle distances. But there's plenty of open source stuff out there on how to learn to do that shit. They're really dedicated guys that spend, like, civilians, military, law enforcement alike, to spend their off time or their next life into just doing PRS matches and stuff like that, and researching data and putting out that data on open source stuff. You just gotta look it up. And if guys if they need ideas and where to look at it, we can they can hit us up and we can look for it. You can go to a course. I think that's probably the easy button, because like we do the course, we provide the ranges and all that stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the easy button. If you do want to do it on your own, there's plenty of resources out there, both visually or interactive or whatever you want, that will get you there.
Yeah, it's definitely regional. It's definitely regional. Like, I live out in the West now. If I want to make if I want to go shoot at 1,000 yards, it's like 20 minutes away or 30 minutes away from here. So like, but that is new to me. That is absolutely new to me, in the sense that I can drive. I don't going and shooting at 1,000 yards is no longer a full day commitment. For many people, it is, and I recognize that. Like, I'm not trying to hold it over. And there are people that I've known who live in areas where if I want to go shoot 1,000 yards, it's a full day commitment, and they figured out how to do it, and that was encouraging, right? And so maybe when I'm thinking about it this way, and would let me know how you think of it, if this seems reasonable. We oftentimes, or you brought it up at the beginning at your intro or earlier on in our conversation, about how you got out of the military and saw this sort of weird amalgam of things that were considered advanced that weren't, or shouldn't be, or weren't unnecessary as far as advanced shooting skills. And I'm using a lot of air quotes today. But as far as advanced shooting skills, you saw that not all of them were all that advanced, or they were unnecessary, or they're more flamboyant than effective, or whatever the criticism fitting the object of the day. Not that you were the savant in the world, but fine. And so, and often there seems to be, in almost like a video game sense, a progression that's sort of subtly hinted at through gun culture, which would be like, you learn how to shoot a pistol, and then you learn how to shoot a carbine, and then you go do an advanced course, whatever that means, which means you get to move and shoot at the same time, and then you go to a real advanced course, which is a CQB course. And somewhere in that stack, you're saying that, being able to do the CQB, and being able to hit at distance don't need to be competing disciplines. In fact, if you're looking for something to do, and you're looking for what should I work on next, adding the ability to shoot distance with a rifle should be both fundamental, but also a thing that you can solve. Like, it's a pursuable goal, and the way that you solve it is through either PRS shooting, or taking a course, or just doing all of the work, the expensive grunt work yourself, and getting the distance and shooting at it and figuring out and paying for the ammo and whatever. Is this the argument that you're making as far as in a progression?
The progression thing is really what you can get your hands on. I mean, if you really invested in thinking about it, and you're like, all right, my first step is, I should get a handgun so that I can conceal carry. Sure. I mean, that makes absolute sense. I don't know who you are, but if you've made that determination, I have to assume that you care about yourself and all that shit, and you start shooting handgun stuff. Okay. Rifle progression, it can go either way. I had this conversation with Ben Stoger about distance stuff, and I was in the mindset that, like, we should start shooting not at long distance with a rifle, but we should start shooting at distance. Like all my stuff is 0 to 100 meters, so that would probably be the bare minimum. And then we can start working our way back or working our way forward. And Ben's in the mindset like you can probably just start wherever you want. You can start at short distance or long distance or in between. The fundamentals are all going to be the same. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think the progression is tailored to you. I can't put out a blanket one. I have no idea what the situation is, and quite obviously, everyone's is going to be different. So if you want, the point is like you need to do the fundamentals of shooting, bare minimum, at whatever distance you want to do it. You can shoot fast and accurate at distance and fast and accurate at a close end, and the times are going to be different, but the hits are all going to be the same. And you may need to be way faster up close because it is absolutely a more dangerous situation relatively, because the closer you come in, the more luck that individual is going to get, and it doesn't take a very good shot to actually end your day. So there's arguments for both sides. I don't think there is a step progression. I just think you need to get a lot of ammo and you need to get at least iron sights in a rifle and fucking go shoot. You can do practice distance shooting at just 100 meters and get down with the fundamentals with your natural point of aim, sight picture, trigger squeeze, all these things that put inputs into your gun that you don't want, and still hit small targets at distance. And maybe you can get a little bit of wind in there to start accommodating that. Someone asked like, what was the best rifle to get into long distance shooting? I was like, what do you have right now? So I have an AR. I'm like, that's perfect. If you can shoot an AR at distance, once you start getting in the larger calibers, it's the easy button.
Yeah, no, I think there's a reason why the AR-15 has done so well for so long, and it's a combination of things. I mean, sure, there's infrastructure behind it with the ability to swap out parts and interchangeability of so many different options, but its consistency over at least the last 50 years and its refinement has led to good things. I mean, be good at that,
yeah, for sure.
Be good at that. And I'm even looking at myself here where I'm thinking I have the ability to reach out further. And so now I'm thinking about, do I want to, do I want to get a gas gun? Do I want to get a bolt gun? What do I want to use for more distance shooting? And there are different arguments to be made, but at the end of the day, on how that goes, I've kind of recognized that I could get better at shooting the AR that I have at the distances that are now available, and seeing where I start falling off more quickly.
Yeah, the any AR you got is more than likely more capable than you have an understanding of it. I mean, I showed up late to the game as well. The military taught you always point target and area target stuff, which is crazy with a rifle. Makes sense with a machine gun, but area target effect out to 600, whatever. It's all still there too. It's all still being taught, which is super crazy.
It's white paper shit. It's just white paper. It's when I'm saying not white people, I'm saying white paper shit. It's like it looks really good. It looks really good on paper, but when you're like you give it to somebody who's been doing it, this is dumb. Like it just
maybe it's just maybe because it's open access. Maybe it's just a
propaganda.
Hopefully the Russians are looking at it and they're like, yeah, see, they can only shoot out at 500 meters, guys. We got them.
All right, we are gonna measure all of our engagements at 510 meters.
Yep.
So dumb. The Russians. Let's see what they know. The Russians. Let's just quantify the entire summation of knowledge of the entire Rus people. That's not how that works. There's these Russians. Russians.
There's some fucking massive history. It's a huge country, guys, and it's been conquered many, many times. There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on there. This is nothing new.
It's like saying all Americans are the same.
Oh yeah, we are all exactly the same. We are all cornbread and rye whiskey.
Was it you that posted that meme about what it was like Japanese anime, and like the American guy was always like this Arnold Schwarzenegger dude. It
That
showed
was
like 4 different pictures.
that was Orion Training Group, and it was just so
Okay.
funny. I think what it said was be the American that Japanese anime thinks you're supposed to be. Like they all have like ridiculous haircuts and they're like yelling all the time.
American shirts on. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all wearing wife beaters with the flag on. Like be the American, but they're all just not ripped. They're just jacked. Like
Yeah.
this dude's
Sunglasses are a requirement.
sunglasses are a requirement so that you don't burn the sun with your glare. Uh, but
When
yeah,
you get
it
a
was.
chance, look up Korean Jesus. I won't spoil it, but just look up Korean Jesus.
I've probably seen it. I don't know if
It's
I
pretty
want.
impressive.
I don't know if I want to. It sounds hilarious. I don't know if I have a Korean. I'm pretty sure. Is this the same one from like what's the is the
It's a
movie?
statue.
It's the statue. It's the 21 Jump Street Korean Jesus.
Is that what? I haven't seen that one. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it might be that one. It's funny, but I mean, yeah, be the American that the Japanese think you are. It's like, oh, But I mean, but Jared has been, like Jared's come on the show a couple times, and I appreciate his optimism when it comes to the combination of like training and fitness and mindset in the sense of like who's saying that we can't be strong? Like no one cares, dude. No one cares. Like, oh, you can't be capable. That's bad. Like, I don't. Uh,
Yeah.
that's not.
That makes sense. Like we were getting back to plate carrier stuff, and if you should wear it. I remember watching a video about diet,
Mhm.
and the guy's talking like, yeah, you dieting because you want to lose weight or whatever. For the sake of this conversation, I'm just going to assume you're working out because if you're not exercising, this shit doesn't matter. So I have to go back and like, yeah, wearing a plate carrier is when you're like, I had to assume you're exercising because if you're just buying a plate carrier and wearing it around the house and stuff, that's not going to cut it. You got to exercise. So yes. Oh, and also kit shape is a thing. Being in kit shape. I'm sure you're aware of that.
I would like to let's just say let's just assume I'm not because I think I know what you're talking about in the sense of
Yeah,
common
I am not in kit
conversation.
shape right now.
Oh,
Yeah, like
I
when you
would.
get back, yeah, when you get back from your 6 month rotation with 100 plus hits or whatever, you're in kit shape. And
Mhm.
then you go on leave for 2 weeks and come back and you put it on, you're like, oh my god, this thing is heavy. It's
Yes.
that quick
Yeah.
to lose.
I know. I've said that like when people want to get familiar with wearing a plate carrier, they should wear it around the house. They really
Hmm.
should.
No,
Like they should.
absolutely.
Like
But that
there is a
shouldn't be.
there's a difference between being able to put on a plate carrier and go do a Murph, which isn't easy. It's not easy. But there's a difference between being able to do that and being able to throw on a plate carrier and wear it for 12 hours.
Yeah, and
And being able to
I've made that
over.
comment before too. It's like wear your shit all the time. Same with like night vision. Guys are like, "What's the best night vision course?" It's like it's in your house. Um,
Yeah, that's a
put
really
them
good
on
one.
and do the dishes or feed the dogs or whatever.
Yeah.
Understanding that depth perception.
Yeah. It's just
But
time.
again, I have to assume you're exercising.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that assumption. You know, little does he know. The last time I was at the gym, uh, whatever. No, it's there is a base level assumption. Like, know where you're at in that sense of yes, we all know it. Like, I trust me, I know it when I'm not. I know it when I'm slacking, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to be able to tell those things. I'm not saying it's okay. Like, oh, love you for who you are, but like, there is a real sense in the matter of there's a difference between I can't walk a flight of stairs, and I know that if I had to go if my life depended on me completing a certain completing a Murph in plates in less than 45 minutes right now, it might be a difficult one. It might be difficult. I don't know. There's different examples of that, but like it's good. It's just I appreciate Jared's outlook, and I know this is the second time I've said it in this show, is that I appreciate his outlook in saying that, like, be proud of how hard you're working and go do it. And, like, not be proud isn't be arrogant, but like, go do it. Go physique, go get in shape. It's good. It's good. Like, it's good. It's not like, oh, it's a burden I have to,
I mean,
I fall into that mindset way too often of, like, going to the gym is a chore, not an optimism. And then when I get in that mindset, I tend to, like, get worse at everything and I have to break myself out of it.
I grew up in the '80s. All my action heroes were fucking monsters,
Yes.
and that's all I can remember. It's like those guys being monsters and just damn near invincible. An alien couldn't even kill Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like that. So sure, at this day and age, could it hurt some kids? And like, I don't really think so. I think like it's good as a kid to have your hero be, damn near invincible, wanting to be that fucking great. Will I ever get to be Arnold? Hell no. But still, like uh, seeing those action stars doing all these things with their muscles just hanging out over the place, like that was motivating as hell. Not like, oh look, the hero is this normal guy who goes to school and he has no superpowers or anything. He doesn't work out or eat healthy. He's just he's a witty dude. Like that's not motivating.
No,
I want to aspire to be something.
it's not motivating when the character, like, we need to bring back 80s montage heroes where it's like,
Yeah, for sure.
Rocky didn't win the fight because he was Rocky. Rocky won the fight because he went through the montage. He went through the
Yeah,
training. I mean, given its reduction of time, but like, how insulting would it be? Maybe it's not insulting, but there is a certain attitude of weakness within our culture of, like, just discover me for who I am. It's like,
yes.
no. The answer is no. Like, no, you're nothing. None of it matters. None of who, like, you don't have you you don't have, like, um you don't have the Dragon Ball Z effect where, like, as soon as you're under enough pressure, you become the better thing. It's like there's an element of that that's true with, like, training and exercise and time, but the story of the character who, like, is a normal dude who does the normal dude thing and everything's normal about him, and then I'll bring up the idea of the example of the movie Wanted.
Right.
I saw it. It recently was on. We like over. It was on. We watched it over the holiday or something. I don't remember whether it was on television in the background or something. But, like, what I remember of the plot, and I don't remember much of it because I wasn't really paying attention, was that you basically have a normal dude who finds himself in a guild of assassins, who then also finds out that because of his blood or something, he's also one of them because of his dad, and it's just discovering unknown potential, hidden potential. And it's like, that is a metaphysic statement that's claiming that there's something about you that is buried away, and you just need the world to see it for what it is, and then it will become that thing. And that attitude is very different than, I need to work to become a thing. And, like, I wonder if there's an element of that within gun culture right now, as we're seeing. I wonder if there's an element of that that's sort of been subtly ingrained into gun culture, which is that maybe when gun culture sees me for what I really am, then they'll appreciate me for who I really am, and instead of approaching it with the attitude of, um, this is what I'm working towards, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and like the time and the dedication and putting that out. Like, you can certainly dismiss somebody of quality because you have your own arrogance, and that would be a foolish thing to do. But I wonder if there's a certain element within gun culture which is approaching it with the sort of Japanese anime main character mindset of, like, I'm gonna unlock my new potential, as if it was already there. And like, well, potential was there, but we're not talking about, people will eventually discover that I'm a Super Saiyan. Rather, it's, am I going to put in the work to achieve the thing, or do I have it and people just need to recognize it? And where you line up in that attitude is an interesting subject. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you or I can at least speak. We could probably at least speak to it from the military side. That used to be a thing. Like, well, I was in the military, so I have to know what I'm talking about. Um, and then you have, there's always even in the special operations community, there's always guys that are average, guys that made the cut, whatever that is, and then didn't really ever try to improve. They made the cut, they make the PT tests, they do enough to be on team. And then you have guys that are like really good examples are like Joe Dawson from Bruiser, Mike Pranka from X-Ray Alpha, and those are just examples of guys who did more. They didn't do the minimum. They went out outside of their community to get to the experts, to understand more about their craft and whatever it is, the shooting or distance shooting or jumping, parachuting, whatever. Those guys are the ones that most certainly, I hate to say, like, they're definitely the ones that you want to listen to more, because they have sought out more resources and have more of a better idea of what is necessary, what is better, what is great, what is bad, whatever, instead of just because, I was a SEAL for 4 years. So what I say in this shooting course is gospel, or I was a Green Beret for 15 years and what I say is it's absolutely true. I would shit on my career field as well, but I don't hear about a lot of Air Force guys that are in the business. But like there is a distinction there, and it gets to your point where, like, just because I passed a selection program doesn't necessarily mean that I know exactly what it is when it comes to a survival scenario, or when it comes to a home invasion or whatever the fuck. I made the prime example of already done 3 combat appointments. I had a very stressful time dealing with a home invasion thing, scenario, which it really wasn't. So yeah, okay. As you see a lot of combat, what do you mean? You know what to do when a guy busts in your house? Yeah, you just shoot him or whatever. So I think that makes sense as far as from my experience. I'm sure it exists with LEO guys. I'm sure it makes sense with maybe some guys that have 3-gun time a little bit. Maybe they won a competition and now they think that they're king shit and they deserve that kind of recognition. So yeah, that absolutely exists. My favorite motivational poster of all time. It's 5 forks lined up in a row. I only have 4 fingers though, and it's normal fork, normal fork, normal fork, and then it has one that's all crooked and jagged, and it says, "Just because you're special doesn't mean you're useful." And like, I laughed at it, but it makes so much fucking sense. Like, just we get it.
Mm-hmm.
We're all unique snowflakes. Like, we're all unique. I got it, but that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make you useful. What
Yeah.
makes you useful is your intent, your drive, your commitment. That makes you useful. You only have to
Mm-hmm.
be good at something. You can get there quite possibly, but what drives you, what motivates you, what is your purpose? That's what makes you fucking useful. And you don't want to be a non-useful person.
Okay, yeah, I need you to say that again. Now, when people think of use, you can very quickly reduce it to something like utilitarianism. Like the
Mhm.
value of a thing is in its utility, which is not exactly what utilitarianism is, but whatever. And you said your value to the your value to the team or the community or whatever it is determined by your purpose, which is
No,
a
purpose isn't like what drives you.
Yeah, what drives you? Yeah, like your value is
Yeah.
determined by what drives you. So like your value to the team is more dependent on what your focus is than what your rote utility is. Is that
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, because you can get people with specific skill sets, and they may be good at it, may not be good at it, but if they have no drive, they have no commitment. I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with guys had specialties, but they really didn't want to be a part of that. RTO is a great fucking great example. They have a really shit job, and if they don't commit themselves to the greater mission or the purpose, they're not going to excel at that skill set. They're not going to help the team or the mission or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Um, so that like there has to be some kind of purposeful motivation behind whatever it is you're good at or whatever it is you're trying to get at in
Mm-hmm.
order for it to benefit the rest of us. I think the where it diverges is like, is the motivation to benefit myself or is the motivation to benefit others? I think they can come together as well. Maybe that's where the line is drawn, but it in a sense, like whatever it is you do for yourself is more likely going to benefit others if it benefits you. That's good. It gets a really touchy subject, I guess, but yeah.
It does.
Again, if you have no drive, you can't. It's not going to help others.
Okay, so you know somebody, or when somebody is disingenuous, when somebody is um when somebody's not a part of the team. I think one of the advantages that military has that people who have spent time in the military have over people who have not is that they have lived in an environment where the mission was somewhat predetermined. So you can say we at least have a bit more of a framework by which we can compare things. Like,
Right.
the guy who's in it for himself, because it becomes so obvious. I don't know how to say it in any other way, but it's that that when you go to the team room, the AO, the training facility, whatever it is, who's the guy who's not in it for the team. He's in it for himself. And sometimes you have very overt ways of describing that and understanding that. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're just felt and known in a different way that's not like I can't put my finger on it, but I can see it when I see it. Oh, I know that the audio is still here, but I'm going to wait until we get, because the recording's continuing, but I'm going to be a little patient to see when we finish this. Audio is still there?
Yep, I got you.
Okay, cool. So as long as that was retained within the military framework, we see it. And so within gun culture, it's not, I think I forget who we were talking about earlier, but the idea, like the word shill gets thrown around a lot. And we have certain terms that we use for people who we hold disdain for, like sellout, shill, narcissist, or whatever it is. But the issue being with those things that I have is that we need to be clear in what we're describing and what is the thing that we dislike. The thing that I don't like about someone that you would refer to as a shill is that they are accepting financial gain for dishonesty. I will lie about a thing to say something. I will get paid to lie, is really what it is. It's the fact that they're lying and it's a breach of character. It's not the stats that they're saying or the facts that they're saying or whatever. It's the fact that they're lying for financial gain. They're betraying their trust, and that's an issue. Whereas within gun culture itself, the within gun as we're talking about as citizens, you and I are not going to meet up tomorrow and say, all right, the mission is going to go to do the thing at the place. Our mission is much broader. It's a lot more difficult to define. And uh and don't make me re-record my Friday solo, but like in the sense of our mission is so much more ambiguous and requires a lot more work. And so to see a guy who's not in it for the culture, and I'm not saying we get around and sing kumbaya and say we're all together in this together. I'm saying the the betrayal of the person who's only in it for themselves is just as close to home. It just isn't as immediate. And
Correct.
and so I'm trying to figure out how this is kind of the
It's
clinch.
tough. Yeah.
It's the clincher point of the subject, in that within gun culture, within the military, we have a framework of, we know what we're all working towards, this skill set, or we're all trying to align what we're doing towards this mission. And that is one of the advantages and conveniences of the military, is at least I can say, you are being selfish right now because you're career chasing, not mission. You're career focused, not mission focused. And we have a framework by which we can make that argument. But now, if we step out of the military, that becomes much more difficult to describe, because we have different values and they have variations and we have things. And so part of what I see a good coming out of gun culture, which was reflected in your experience at SHOT Show, is that we're at least more capable of having conversations about those things. And then we're working towards being able to build those into how we organize our culture, which has to happen naturally. It's kind of ugly. It's kind of how it goes. So I'm curious on what your approach to that subject would be and what you would make as an argument for. I can hear you, I think.
Yeah, I cut out for a second. So what was the question again?
The question,
My bad.
no, it's fine. We're all working towards making this hardware, software stuff work. My question would be, as you've stepped out of the military and you're now in gun culture writ large, which, welcome to the club, I guess. How when you look at yourself, how do you think? What would you argue is like a good aim for gun culture as a whole? Like, if you were to say if gun culture could aim at this mission, what would be a good one? I'm not saying it's the end all be all. We're not trying to like close the book on it. I'm saying, what do you think is a good argument? What's a good aim and a good rubric for saying, hey, I'm straying from the path. I am focused too much on myself, because I'm looking at this in forms of self-reflection as well.
Yeah. So as you said, like there's so many goals to be had. I think it's really hard to pinpoint one. I think a lofty, what we would call like 15-year goal or whatever, is to figure out finally a way to eliminate the term gun culture. I mean, it's just if you say an American or America, it's just inherent that we're gonna have guns. We own them. We're allowed to. It's a God-given right. And the fact that we say gun culture stuff, it's not going to be an offensive thing or anything, but it shouldn't be separated from the normalities of who we are and where we came from. Like it just is. So talking about 2A communities and stuff like that, are you talking about all of us? Because that's what we are. We're all Americans. We all have those rights. So labeling it as such, I think is kind of, I don't know if we're saying as extreme as creating division and such, but that's just naturally who we are. We're 2A gun community folks. That's just, it comes with the job title of American.
Okay.
As far as the negative side with me, in my personal realm, I don't know what my end goal is in a positive way, because it's going to change depending on what help people need. But as far as where I know I'm drifting, where I become irrelevant, where my information that I had to provide is no longer relevant. And that's when you start seeing people who have moved past their time. They start creating new things, or they start sponsoring new things, or they start backing like wild technology or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. And you're like, why? They used to be like this, and now all of a sudden they're doing ninja rolls on the range, or they're supporting some weird type of optic for a handgun, which doesn't make any sense, or whatever it is. I don't want to get to that point. I don't need this. I want this very bad. I want to help. But like getting back to the riots thing, like if I'm not needed, then I'm going to go away. I'm going to be that village elder that's going to wander into the woods and to go die, because I know it's my time.
Okay.
I don't want to be that individual that's selling something just to keep me in the game. So yeah, no specific goal other than like hopefully we don't have to like enunciate on the 2A thing. Like that's inherently ours. It's just who we are. I should just say an American and you got it. And then the other
I
side
like
is
that.
once I get to this point in my life where I am no longer needed, I'm going away. I'm not going to create the pink dragon so you can keep you can keep tracking and trying to catch my Instagram page.
Interesting. Okay, I when you first said it, I thought I was thinking like the contrary, and the point saying is that like your personal goal is to stay relevant, and I was like, well, I mean, isn't
No.
it's not. Okay, I appreciate the explanation because it made me start thinking a little bit on like we find it ugly when somebody just creates controversy to stay relevant. Like that's
Right.
ugly, right? And so I appreciate that. I do appreciate the distinction. But we've been on this show for about 2 hours, so either we should wrap it up and call it a day, or buckle back down. But I think it'd be better to have you on again. I really would. I'd rather.
Yeah, sure.
This is a great conversation on my end. Now at this point in time, you know, I'm sure quite a few of the people who are listening to this are listening to this because they're following you over. But for those who are who follow the show, who are not familiar with your work or who want to follow you, I can include it I'll include it in the description below. But where do people find you? Who are you? How do they follow you for more content?
Yep. So on Instagram at Counting Coup Tactical with underscores in between the words, and that's just kind of like my being able to keep in touch with folks and pass along honestly things that just come to my mind as I'm walking around taking care of this farm. I'm like, oh, I remember that, and I'll put it out there and just hit send. So some content in there for informational purposes. Sometimes it's me being an emotional fuck, talking about whatever, and putting my opinions out there, and also passing along information in regards to I say our course. So me and Mike from at Prayer Corps, we work together when it comes to either distance carbine or long range shooting with higher caliber stuff. That's what we're typically dealing in right now. There's room for expansion later on, but that seems to be the more desirable stuff right now. People want to learn to shoot long range, whether it doesn't matter caliber or whatever. So that's what we're sticking with. Working on a website so we can post those course times. We're just not there yet, but we'll post them on the Instagram.
So if somebody wants to start looking at your calendar to try to figure out when you're teaching a course, or if they're very interested in taking a course from you, and they might be trying to be planning like a year out, is it best to just follow you on Instagram at Counting Coup? Is that the best
Yep,
one?
me and yes, I'll pass along all the information that's going on with that. Mike will be our lead contact when actually scheduling times for that, but I
All right.
pass all the information on, so it's all right.
You mentioned his handle. I didn't hear it correct. I didn't hear it. What was his handle?
Yeah, it's weird. Praecore,
P
Praecore.
Praecore. Praecore. Got it. Well, Fred, thanks for coming on. I really have appreciated this conversation. I think you know, I look forward to our next one. I do. I'm thankful that we were able to cover kind of a gambit of subjects, whether it was military experience, knowledge, and comparisons to like what are goals that are worth aiming at. I do think I thank you. I'm thankful for your your insight and your input into the subject, and I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. But then, you know, for those who are still listening, I thank you for your time. I thank you for spending time listening to us discuss what we think are valuable. And I want to call back to something that you said, Fred, about the goal would be to eliminate the need for the need for the distinction of the term gun culture, and I do honestly believe that what we are referring to as American gun culture will be Americana in the days to come. It will just become synonymous with American, as American is people who take responsibility for their own lives, and they don't yield it in exchange for subservience to a government. It's not. It's an admirable goal, and I believe it's achievable. It may not be as easy to quantify, but I think it's worth pursuing. So I appreciate that. But yeah, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast, and we will see you soon. If you want to support the channel, head over to redactedllc.com. That's where our merch is. You can follow us on Instagram, and we will be coming up with some more stuff soon. As in, I do know that we're doing a release for We're doing a release. Stay tuned for the release that's coming out. That the proceeds will be going to the Firearms Policy Coalition. As of now, that's the plan. We're working on that. You've probably already seen hints of it, and we will see you soon. So thank you very much. Take care.